Here's the thing, when God has something for you, no one can stop it. No one. Not your past, not your circumstances, not the people who doubt you. When God has a plan for your life, it's already done. It's already written. And no matter how many obstacles you face, no matter how many setbacks you encounter, God's plan will prevail. It was around 3 a.m. That time when most of the world is asleep. But for some reason, I found myself wide awake, pacing the floor, restless, with thoughts swirling around in my mind. I was frustrated, burdened by the weight of my life and the fact that I wasn't where I wanted to be. Something wasn't right. I didn't feel like I was living up to my potential, like I was falling short of everything I believed I was capable of. So I did what I knew best in moments like that. I prayed. I went out into the stillness of the night alone with my thoughts and my heart, and I started talking to God. God, I'm not where I want to be, I began, my voice almost a whisper in the silence. Why? Why am I stuck? Why am I not moving forward like I thought I would? What's holding me back? I laid out everything that I believed had been holding me down. I listed off every reason, every excuse, every piece of evidence that I could think of to explain why my life wasn't where I thought it should be. I was looking for God to validate my feelings, to give me some kind of affirmation that I had been dealt a difficult hand, and that it wasn't my fault that I was stuck. I wanted him to tell me that I had been wronged, that life had been unfair to me, and that I had every right to feel frustrated and defeated. But what I heard in response wasn't anything like what I expected. In the quiet of that early morning, I felt God's voice speak to my heart in a way that I hadn't heard before. It wasn't harsh, but it was firm and direct. He said, "Stop being a victim." I froze. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. "What do you mean, a victim?" I asked, almost incredulous. It felt like a slap in the face because I had never thought of myself as a victim. I had always thought that I was just dealing with the cards life had handed me, doing the best I could under the circumstances. But those words hit me hard. "You're grown now," God said. "The decisions you make today are up to you. You can't keep blaming your past for where you are now." That was the turning point for me. It was like a light bulb went off in my mind. I had spent so much time blaming my circumstances, my past, and other people for the fact that I wasn't where I wanted to be. I had told myself over and over again that my struggles were the result of things that were beyond my control. Things that had happened to me, not things I had caused. But in that moment, God was showing me that the power to change my life was already in my hands. I just hadn't been using it. You see, for years I had been living with a victim mentality. I didn't even realize it at the time, but that's exactly what it was. I had been telling myself that my life was the way it was because of the things that had happened to me, because of the circumstances I was born into, because of the things I couldn't control. But God was telling me that I had more control than I realized. He was telling me that if I wanted to change my life, I needed to start taking responsibility for it. That moment was a wake-up call, and it changed everything for me. I realized that if I wanted to see transformation in my life, it had to start with me. It wasn't going to come from anyone else. It wasn't going to come from my family, from my friends, or from my circumstances changing. It had to come from within me. I began to understand something that I had never fully grasped before. Real transformation doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from waiting for someone else to fix your problems. It doesn't come from hoping that your circumstances will suddenly change. Real transformation comes from within. It comes from recognizing the power that God has already placed inside of you and deciding to use it. The power to change your life isn't somewhere out there, it's already inside of you. For so long, I had been focusing on all the things that were wrong in my life. I had been zeroing in on every obstacle, every setback, every unfair situation that had held me back. I had become so focused on what I couldn't control that I had forgotten about what I could control. And what I could control was my mindset, my attitude, and my actions. That's the thing about life. It's not about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to it. There are always going to be things that are out of your control. There are always going to be circumstances that you didn't choose and that you didn't cause. But what you can control is how you respond to those circumstances. What you can control is your perspective, your attitude, and the decisions you make moving forward. Too many of us give up too soon. We pray once, and when we don't get the answer we want right away, we quit. We throw in the towel because it didn't happen on our timeline. But prayer is not a one-time transaction. It's not something you do once and then walk away from. Prayer is a journey, a process that requires persistence and faith. You see, prayer is about more than just asking God for things. It's about building a relationship with Him. It's about aligning your heart with His will. And sometimes that alignment takes time. Sometimes the answer doesn't come right away because God is working something out in you first. He's preparing you for what's coming. And that preparation process takes time. But too often we give up before we see the breakthrough. We pray for 5 minutes, and when the situation doesn't change immediately, we assume that God isn't listening. Or worse, that He doesn't care. But let me tell you something, God hears every prayer. He knows the desires of your heart. He knows what you need even before you ask. But He also knows the right time to give it to you. When you pray, you're not just asking God to change your circumstances. You're asking Him to change you. And sometimes that change takes time. It takes persistence. It takes faith. You have to be willing to stay in the fight, to keep praying even when you don't see immediate results. One of the biggest mistakes we make is giving up too soon. We expect instant answers, instant gratification, but that's not how faith works. Faith is about trusting God even when you can't see the outcome. It's about believing that He is working on your behalf, even when everything around you suggests otherwise. Let me ask you this. How many times have you given up on a prayer because the answer didn't come as quickly as you wanted? How many times have you thrown in the towel because the situation didn't change immediately? How many times have you walked away from a dream because the road was too hard, too long, or too uncertain? If you want to see real change in your life, You have to stay in the fight. You have to keep praying, keep believing, keep trusting that God is working behind the scenes. Just because you don't see the answer yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. We are all spiritual beings having a human experience. And as spiritual beings, we are going to face challenges that test our faith. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. There will be moments when everything seems to fall apart, when the road ahead looks impossible, when your faith is shaken to its core. But here's the thing, it's in those moments of testing that your faith is strengthened. It's in those moments of uncertainty that you learn to trust God in a deeper way. Anyone can have faith when things are going well. Anyone can believe when life is easy. But real faith is forged in the fire of adversity. Real faith is built when you keep trusting God, even when everything around you says to give up. One of the most important lessons I've learned is this: my commitment to God, to my dreams, to my purpose, has to go beyond how I feel in the moment. It has to go beyond my circumstances. My definition of commitment has always been staying true to what I said I would do, long after the mood I set it in has left. It's easy to make a commitment when you're feeling good, when the energy is high, when everything is going your way. But what happens when the mood changes? What happens when life throws you a curveball? What happens when things don't go as planned? That's when you find out what you're really made of. That's when you discover the depth of your faith, the strength of your commitment. Because anyone can stay committed when it's easy, but the real test of commitment comes when things get hard. The real test comes when you face setbacks, disappointments, and failures. I had to make a choice. Would I give up? Would I let this moment define me? Or would I stay true to who I was, even if my circumstances had changed? I could still stay true to my faith, to my values, to my purpose, whatever that purpose might be. I began to realize something profound. God's plan for my life was bigger than the setbacks, disappointments, and failures. It was bigger than anything I could have imagined. You see, when one door closes, it's not the end. It's just the beginning of something new. I didn't know it at the time, but God was redirecting me. He was taking me down a different path. One that I couldn't see, but one that was far greater than anything I had planned for myself. That's the beauty of God's plan. It's always bigger, better, and more fulfilling than anything we could dream up on our own. But it requires trust. It requires faith. It requires the willingness to let go of our own understanding and lean into His. Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding." That's one of the hardest things to do because we want to understand. We want to know why things happen the way they do. We want to have control. But faith is not about understanding, it's about trusting. It's about trusting that God knows what He's doing, even when we don't. It's about believing that His plan is better than ours, even when we can't see the full picture. It's about letting go of our need to control the outcome and allowing God to lead us where He wants us to go. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." But being still is one of the hardest things for us to do. We live in a world that values movement, action, productivity. We're always doing something, always trying to fix things, always trying to make things happen. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is be still. Being still doesn't mean doing nothing. It means trusting that God is already at work, even if you can't see it. It means letting go of your need to control the situation and allowing God to move in His time. Think about Moses. He was standing at the edge of the Red Sea with the Egyptian army closing in behind him. There was no way out. It looked like the end. But God told Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea, and when he did, the waters parted. God made a way where there was no way. That's what happens when you trust God. He makes a way where there seems to be no way. He opens doors that no man can close. He moves mountains that you thought were immovable. But you have to be willing to trust Him. You have to be willing to let go of your own understanding and lean into His promises. No matter how many obstacles you face, no matter how many setbacks you encounter, God's plan will prevail. And no one can stop it. No one. No one. No one.